All right, so I'm going to call our May 9th joint school board meeting for SAU 44 to order at 6:32 p.m. And we'll start with a roll call. Susan Levinson. Kathy Brosnan is not here tonight. Carol Martin, not here yet. Megan Sadasco.
Yes.
Lori Colbert.
Yes.
Todd Abernathy.
Here.
Melissa Sauls. Here. Brian Winslow.
I'm here.
And Jen Fry, I'm here as well. All right, next up we have public comments. We have no members of the public present. Is there anyone from either board that would like to address the larger group right now? All right. Next on our agenda, we had the approval of minutes from April 11th. And I don't believe those have come in on time. They are not here just yet. So we can push that off to our following meeting, as well as those January 10th meeting minutes that are outstanding.
I turned in notes.
Yeah,
and
Ms.
you probably
Levinson.
turned in your notes as well.
Yeah, Ms. Levinson and Mr. Byrne have turned in their notes as to what happened during that time that our video and audio were down to, so we can have those minutes. So hopefully next meeting we'll have April 11th and our January 10th minutes ready to go. All right, committee reports. Did any committees meet in the last month? I know that, and Carol's not here yet, so we can maybe bump this down to the structuring committee and transition committee piece, but Carol and Melissa met to just tour the SAU to see what equipment and materials were here to help with the process of dividing that up. But Carol is expected to come, so maybe we'll just move that down to the SAU changes.
The only other thing I wanted to mention on the committee reports, if I may, and that is Co Brown reached out to me and asked if we were anticipating all of the organizations work together on a common master plan, because that will be coming up due. So the PD master plan. And I'd said at this point, with all the three districts going in separate ways, as well as CBNA, I think we'll all wind up doing our own individual master plans for PD. So I just wanted to make sure that the joint board heard that, because it is something each local district's going to want to start considering as our plan is set to sunset soon.
It's 2023, right?
23, yes. So you got to do a bit of work ahead of the.
Right. Well, I was wondering, I looked at that myself. So the fact that Stratford is out and they're noted in it. So are they still complying with it, falling under it, even though they're not in SAU 44?
I haven't kept up with what Stratford is working on right now.
So what would the expectation be? Maybe we can talk about it at our next meeting, but what would Nottingham's expectation be if we're not in the SAU? Do we have to come up with our own plan, or can we still?
You could still facilitate under that plan because you're still a member, but as we develop the new one,
Okay.
you'd want to have a brand new one.
Okay.
That would have been my thought, because it was hard enough to get us together when we were one SAU, but
Yep.
three separate SAUs trying to align everyone's schedule and all the teacher schedule and calendars. I feel like that might be a bit of a challenge.
We have a lot of new members. Could you just give a brief update of what the PD master plan is?
Yeah, so the PD master plan was put together. It's something that you're required for the state. And what that is in order for teachers to be certified, they have to follow a PD plan. So they're allowed so many hours in their field, which is for a single certification, I believe it's 40 hours, 45. And then you need an additional 30 hours based on what your district is doing in order to get recertified every 3 years. So 75 hours over 3 years. And for each individual additional certification after your primary, you need an additional 30 hours in that on that cert. So that's really what that plan does, is talks about what the districts are doing in uniform to try to move the PD together so that you can use those hours. And when the professional development plan days would be, who are your reps to go to and ask on what you need and how to get approved before it goes to the principals, because each building has their own PD rep. So you would say, I want to go to this PD, explain it to your rep would approve it, and then from there it would go to the building level to approve, and finally it would come up to the SAU.
Great, thank you so much for that.
I did notice in there too, is that the rubric for the actual evaluation. So you've got the observations, but there's also a rubric in there for evaluations, I believe. for the year end, so it's pretty all encompassing. There's not a lot
Yes.
to that.
Yep, their evaluation forms and there's criteria, so
Mhm.
even your administrator's form should be, a copy of that should be in there as well.
It gives a lot of different options for staff to complete those PD hours, workshops, but there's like other things like independent studies and a whole section of that plan describes all the different options for completing PD hours.
As well as depending on the year you're in, whether it's year 1, year 2, or year 3 of your cycle, what you're allowed to do. And if you're an experienced educator versus a beginning educator.
Can I ask with that, does that include the preschool level and all the different levels of teachers?
It was the
in
entire SAU.
That, so the preschool is included.
Great. Anything else related to committee reports? Now that Miss Martin is here, if you, sorry to throw you right in the middle of it, but I was just hoping that you and Melissa could just talk briefly about the meeting that you had just to go over SAU materials and furniture and all that good stuff.
Well, we did the walkthrough. Yep. So we just walked through, looked at all the different furniture on all 3 levels, took notes. And I think it's somewhat held up by us figuring out for Nottingham exactly what our space is. So we did a walkthrough of the construction space as a board last week and took measurements. So if our board needs to talk further, we had some follow-up questions for the town. But I think we have some ideas of what we might need.
Great, fantastic.
What process were we thinking of? So we've walked through and looked, is there any sort of sense of how we like to execute that?
Like a mover, I mean?
Well, no, but decisions about, that. Andrew's up. But then we can stage on the other side of our new building, so that will be helpful. And I think we have this lease extended 1 month for all 3 floors, so that will also help us.
Not for the top floor.
Not top, okay, so that ends June 30th.
Yes.
Okay, good.
He has to get in there as soon as possible. He thought he could go in there this year and get it done. So next year I was like, you'll be able to get in by then.
But the downstairs we still have
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
So are we thinking we would meet, how are we thinking that we'll kind of tag the items that we each think we want, and would we just take that up at our next meeting? What's the thought on all that?
If I may, my only concern about taking that up at the next meeting, it doesn't give enough time for us to order new stuff.
Right.
I will say the only thing that I think that the SAU 44 unit has really looked at, like meaning us as administrators, is the hardware, the actual hardware stuff. And that was put together by Mr. Stanley, the things that needed to stay because they're built into the walls, the switches, to try to take those out the servers. Other than that, we figured we could offset that with any of the newer computers that you need to use. There are 2 servers, 2 additional servers, so we have a total of 5. So 2 would go to you, 3 would stay here because they're already wired and set up. So at that point, it's just trying to offset the cost of one of those servers with additional new computers. But my concern is, the further out we take this, even I would feel more comfortable even if we had to set up an additional meeting in May to do this. I wouldn't want to wait till June because we'll never get the orders
That's
done.
kind of why I'm asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
We're meeting tonight after, so maybe we can.
I just had a thought, because Northwood's meeting on Wednesday, and then I thought your regular meeting is next week, but you're doing an extra one tonight. So maybe we could just ask the SAU basically just to do like a 45-55, right? But a 45-55 split as evenly as possible, and then we can just use that as a starting point. I don't know if that's something that we can get in time for Wednesday, because it's kind of a quick turnaround, but at least, we can maybe discuss more in our meeting, and then you guys can discuss next week, and then maybe if we can at least start with something like that, then maybe, if there's some things we definitely don't want, or some we definitely do want, or whatever, once you guys get hopefully by next week, you'll know more about your SAU space for next year and whatnot.
I think it'll be more furniture than we need, just based on what we looked at. So maybe maybe tonight, if we have just a kind of rough idea of like how many desks types of things we think we might need, then we could do it based on that. Not necessarily, like a 55-45 definitely is gonna be more than we need.
The,
I think that Nottingham should probably take it up tonight, maybe think about
Yeah, I
that
think we can just-
suggestion and.
And yeah, and since, some of that is also the, like I said, the hardware issues, if more of it needs to stay here because it's already, those are things that may be more decided, yes, already, or, I think that, that might just be more of a financial issue than a, actual items issue. If that's, already kind of been decided of what's staying here. But I think we need to go through the list and see what we can use, and then kind of more of sort of numbers, maybe more of what the value of things versus, number of desks or number of chairs.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I guess we'll probably talk to you, because as we shrink space, we're probably not gonna need as much furniture either, so. I guess my question was gonna be, I know Northwood School has a disposal of assets policy, does the SAU have it, so
It does.
we might have to look, if there's stuff that none of us want, we might have to go down that path too.
We have several desks here that I'm afraid would not survive a move. And then we have several desks that are so big that even if they were to be moved, no matter whose office they were in, even if it was in one of our existings, for instance, our all ed desk upstairs, that can't really fit into any office now. It's just so big and it's so heavy to try to move it. That's going to be one of those issues. So you will have a couple, for instance, that desk over there is missing panels, things like that. Those should just be disposed of, but we'll have to agree to write it out. And that was the next question that I was going to talk about, is I think the boards will have to make a decision. And I might not say the exact correct accounting term, but the diminishing assets, you've already given away money for these assets once. So now we're looking at these items, even though when we talked about it being about $27,000 in assets, or say 30,000, I think we rounded up. If you give a third of that away, now these assets are a third less, everything. Because you've already given away the value of it. They're not worth the same amount if you've already given money away on the dollar of it.
Right.
So that's something to consider. The boards will have to decide on how that plays out. The boards will have to decide if they want to do a diminished asset on it because you've already given money away, or if you want to say, no, it's still worth the same amount no matter what, even if we've given a third of it away. So the board will have to make that decision, the boards.
Can I suggest that we maybe do a work session in the next, not this week, but maybe the week after, so that we can just focus in on this piece of it after both of our individual boards have had a chance to meet?
I think that's good. I think you guys will be meeting next Wednesday, so.
Yeah, our full board meeting
Right.
is next Wednesday,
Okay.
and we have the additional Co-Brown, and we have an additional Dover this month.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's fun.
Facilities meeting on the 17th.
I'm wondering if we can look at maybe Monday, the 23rd.
That's their Dover
our
meeting.
That's the Dover meeting.
Mhm.
I don't know if it would take the full board on both boards if they've already talked, or if it could be a subgroup,
That's true.
but
That's true.
the 24th is a Tuesday, and that's wide open on my calendar to be able to, but you wouldn't necessarily need for a work session.
Yeah, the 24th works.
I can't do that day for our work.
Yeah,
So I'm being inducted into an honor society.
Oh, well, congratulations.
That's great.
I don't.
What might be could we do it before the next Northwood board meeting on the 25th? I mean, I don't know how long it will take, I guess.
Northwich on the 20th.
25th.
25th.
Maybe we can just check our schedules and
Yeah,
then
we'll
get some of
look
you
and
guys an
see.
email.
And
We'll
I-
talk tonight.
Okay.
I mean, another thing too, we're gonna meet Wednesday, I'm sure as the Northwood board, we'll have more of this discussion of you guys tonight, and then a week from now, next week, if you guys have more, then I think, you know, can go through Nate just, or the chairs can communicate or
Mhm.
share a list, or, you know, we want to strike this, we want that, you know,
Mhm.
I mean,
That's what I was
know.
thinking about. Maybe it just needs to be one or two from each board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speaking personally, like, in terms of like, I'm not attached to any furniture at all. I mean, whatever works, you know, as long as it comes out even in the end, in the agreement. And, I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I think just the faster we can make decisions, like whatever, if we are going to purchase things, we want to know that, you know, as soon as we can, just to get that, and you guys do too, I'm sure, just to get that lined up, and then, you know, if we're gonna move stuff, then great, we're gonna move it.
Mhm.
But, I mean, like I said, I mean, it really doesn't matter to me who gets what desk or chair or
Mhm.
computer, as long as it just, you know, comes out clean on the accounting books and, you know, looks fair to everybody.
All right. After your meetings, do you just want to, or at some point, do the chairs just want to communicate with each other for a time and
Just
connect?
quickly send you, and yeah. we'll
Okay.
connect.
That'll be the easiest way, probably. All right. Anything else under committee reports? Okay, we'll move on to our business administrators report.
So, thank you, but I don't have too much to speak on. There have not been any significant changes since we last reported. There only is one minor change, and that is the encumbrance for Luann, who is assisting with the grants. And we'll speak to the grants in a little bit. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had a chance to review the reports.
On the monthly revenue report, the Northwood, we're still seeing the 6,000.
Yep.
there, so that's just some oddity requires an inventory or.
It's just an entry that we're waiting for, so we're waiting for that to be paid out, and then that would be cleared off.
Okay.
Because there's 6,000 savings in there right now, so it just didn't get billed forward.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That will be cleared out in the next run. Under the appropriation form.
Maybe 1 minute to catch up here.
And the grant coordination, reimbursement, and the indirect costs, those are just offsetting.
Correct. Do you have the new one where you can see the transfer, the 8,000 was transferred into the indirect cost?
Yeah, I see the.
Yeah.
the debit and credit.
So do we feel that these are close to the fund balance? I don't know if they're accurate.
The only other thing that we are working on currently, working with Vion, is the open purchase orders. So we have sent out the open purchase order reports to both districts to have the secretaries and the building principals review them to see if they have anything that might be still outstanding that should be closed.
Okay.
So we're just waiting for that process to come back. That should be done this week to give us a really good look of what the outstanding fund balance will be.
As far as the AP agents go, are they current, pretty current AP accounts payable agent?
Yep.
So everything's paid up current.
No, so things are not up to date yet. We are working on it, but the things that we do know about are in fact encumbered, so we're just not pay them out yet, though.
So it's just a matter of
Yes,
paying it out to the vendors. and-
correct.
But they're all showing in the encumbrance.
That is correct.
And what I would say too is you can see that we do have some additional revenues that have come in. So those additional revenues will also be showing in at the end as we get closer. We'll bounce that out against and tell you what your overall surplus would be. But because you're creating additional revenues, your surplus will go up. But until that's all lined out, we can't do that. So that 217 is what we've been tracking for quite some time at the SAU.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
else you have to add?
Yes, I do. Actually, I was like, do I do it now?
Yeah, go for it.
All excited. I'll start with Luann's. So each one of you have a grant report. So what you have in front of you is the grant number. You have the start date, the end date of the grants. You have what has been allocated by the State Department of Education, so you can see what those amounts are. And then the GL budget means it's what we've actually requested. So some of them you'll see that we haven't fully requested the full amount. Some of the accounts you will see have been fully allocated already. And then you'll see some of them haven't even been requested because they're new and they haven't started yet. So what Luann and I have been working on since we finalized the audit for last year is reconciling all the grants monthly and getting those caught up. So we are current as of March right now. So we will be working on April shortly here. So we're making good progress there. And we're taking a look at doing some things differently next year with the grants and putting them into the general ledger as the auditors had requested. So that way you can see the monthly expenditures and the revenues all in one report. And that will be reconciled monthly like we talked about. If you don't have any questions about that, I'm going to segue into the next piece, which will kind of talk about the new accounting structure. So this sheet right here. The good news is that this one right here. So this is the new accounting structure. It looks like you might have already started this process, but it was never fully completed. So the new structure at the top is what both districts are going to be going to. So your fund will have 2-digit code. The function will have 4. The object will have 4. Location and it can be called location, school, level. Can be used different names there. That will have 2. And then you'll see the new one, which is called project/grant. That will have 6. So this is where you'll start seeing us track the grants. The grant number will be at the end of all the accounts. Below Northwood and Nottingham, that's how you're currently structured. So you can see Northwood doesn't have the project and grant allocation number there. Nottingham does, but what we're doing is we're making a change from the school location, going from a 3 to a 2-digit number and moving that 0 to the project number, making it 6. So this will be the new accounting structure going forward so that we can manage the grants in the general ledger system.
So like we had done before with Mr. O'Sullivan, when we had account changes, you'll see that, but it will track all those changes will go through in your current form. So your history will come over with it. So there won't be a loss of history. It will just show this, where it is anywhere where you do lose an account number because they merged, we would just note that they merged, especially for when your next presentation, the reason your next budget presentation. And that's just to align everything. Because what winds up happening, as I know both budget committees say, well, what happened to this line? Or because they compare it to last year's, we can easily justify the fact that we weren't keeping up with what the audits were telling us we had to do. And we weren't, because the accounts weren't set up correctly. So now that we're moving these into that spot, everything will line up and it will show that clean history. Very similar to what had to be done when we first implemented this.
And this is going to be effective next school year, so July 1.
Okay.
Yeah. And last but not least, I have one more.
Oh, I'm gonna have a new fund. Oh, two is gonna be
Yeah.
grants.
So the next sheet is this one. This is the SAU 44 preschool fund balance. I know that there was a lot of questions about what the fund balances have been. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the date, and then you'll see whether or not there's a profit or loss for the year, and then the fund balance. So we went back to the 15-16 year, and you can see you had a fund balance of $46,517. You had a profit of the $5,653. Your next year's fund balance for 16-17 is then 52,170 and so forth. So you can follow me as I go down. So you can see the profit loss. So what I've highlighted in yellow, just that's what we really want to talk about this evening is, so all the profits that you've had and your fund balances from the years prior have now accumulated to 117,984.15. That would be shared 3 ways with Stratford, Nottingham, and Northwood. So it's my understanding that Stratford's percentage is 31.1, which is that 36,693.07. And then the remaining balance is a discussion for Northwood and Nottingham. I'm not sure what the allocation's there, but that would be your fund balance up through June 30th of 2020.
21.
No, that's 2020.
Oh, that's
Yep.
right.
And then the profit that we, or when we just closed the audit, excuse me, as of 21, we have a fund balance of 16,169. So that's the discussion for Northwood and Nottingham only to have is about that piece.
So the number for Stratford is just their last apportionment or an average or
It's an average.
of just an average of 5 years, 4 years, 3
I'm
years?
go-
Who
um,
knows?
Nope, they, at the meeting, they decided to use the same average that we looked at, the overall apportionment to make it nice and simple. So they were getting the 31.1% across the board. So they wanted to stay with that same number. We all discussed it because it would be within a couple percent no matter what we did and trying to track all of those things. So we discussed the 31.1%. That's what they were presenting. And at the time, we had thought that there was already a payout of the fund. The only thing you paid out for fund balance was the SAU fund balance, not the preschool fund balance. We went back. That's why. So one of the concerns that was brought up was by Miss Martin. Miss Martin said, wait, it shows 117. I said, there's absolutely no way they had 117 in 1 year. So I was like, we got to go back and track this. So what I came up with was the $13,000 for that year. That last year was 13,000. However, you still had 104,000 on the books from all the previous years. So they did not get paid out for those previous years. So currently what you're looking at is $117,000 from that last year they were in. That's the total amount from all the years preceding, because there was no payout as there was in the general SAU fund balance. If you remember about 2 to 3 years back, you asked Mr. O'Sullivan to pay out the fund balance for the general SAU fund balance. Like there was a large fund balance at the SAU.
Yeah,
That did not include preschool fund balance, and that's what you paid out.
well, I thought we were paying out preschool the whole time and rolling the other, but
So did I until we looked at what those numbers were, and then we looked in that fund account, and it is in there.
We verified with all the auditor reports too as well.
Just to make sure I'm reading this correctly, so I'm down the line where it's 117,000, 117,000, that's what's being split 3 ways, so 36,693 to Stratford. Leaves us with 81,000 left over, and then
Yes.
there's an added to that is the 16,000, so we're looking at like 96,000-ish for June 21. And then we obviously don't know where we're gonna be this year yet and have to get that number audited, but so we'll be looking at like 97,000 and that we're splitting up proportionally between the two of us. or
Yeah,
however that works.
and it's actually gonna be, you guys are tracking right now for about 63,000, if not 70,000, because of the additional revenue from the preschool. So you're gonna be probably right around 150 at the end of this, even after paying out that 30,000. Solely because, again, we go back to, we didn't hire all the staff. So without hiring all the staff, there's a large surplus left in the preschool. So when we do look at that, you are right, you're gonna be adding that up. It will be up to the two boards to decide what that apportionment is. If it's separate for the preschool than it is for the SAU separation. To simplify what the lawyers had advised us, both lawyers, Mr. O'Shaughnessy and Mr. Graham, said that they advised us to use the same consistent number throughout the thing, which was 31.1.
Thank you.
Can I ask the 17-18 year, was that a payout or was there truly a loss?
There was
in
a
the
loss.
Program
so we overspent
by $80,000?
preschool budget that year. We can tie it back to the financials. and
Yep,
see.
I can tell you exactly if you want.
The one question I have, and it's just that I know that there were a couple years where we moved to that weighted average.
That was before me.
Yeah, but, and then after that, Stratford felt like they didn't have the enrollment to support that, so I think they went down to 20.
I think that was even before me, and this is my 5th year, so even if you went back 4 or 5
You think
years.
it's past this,
Yeah,
prior to
especially-
these days, okay.
Yeah, especially when you look at that one big year of loss, that 80,000, I think that would have washed out some of that, because from then coming forward, they would have been a part of the larger cost.
Okay.
But I do understand what you're saying, and I don't think that was ever presented in a calculation like on what it was over the course of the years. I think the only thing that was looked at was the total apportionment of the SAU by the lawyers.
Anything else for us today?
That's it.
All
That's
right.
really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Valley, our student services report.
Okay. So it's pretty straightforward enrollment counts for the step-by-step preschool has stayed pretty steady. Class sizes have stayed steady. So really not a lot of changes going on there. Any questions about the preschool enrollment? And then the alt ed enrollment also has stayed pretty steady. A couple of students coming and going. Those numbers look like they've stayed the same. We have had kids coming in and out, so there have been some changes there, but overall, at any one time, those are the numbers.
Are you seeing an increase in the part-time students as we get closer to the end of the academic year?
Yes, and honestly, the students at Co-Brown that are doing credit recovery kind of can access that grad point program, and we don't track them as
Right.
carefully as we track the full-time
Exactly.
students that are here. So there may be even more fluctuations than we know about because some kids
Absolutely.
just log on to finish a class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
But it's good that that's available to them. For sure, 'cause
Absolutely.
It makes a big difference in their high school career.
Any questions for Ms. LaValle?
One other thing that I'll note about alt ed is that I did get an email from the grad point program, and they are going to be phasing out grad point over the next 2 years. So no changes right now. Next year they have a slightly reduced catalog, although when I looked at it, it really has all the same courses that our kids tend to use. So I'm not anticipating any big changes, but the year after they will be sunsetting grad point, and we will have to go to something else. So I'll have more about that as time goes on. Nothing that we need to do anything about immediately, but just on the horizon. That's all.
Anything else? Questions? No? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. LaValle. Can we cut off everyone else? loose?
Well, I was just gonna ask if we could go to D before. So
Sure.
do undermine do D because I'm gonna let the business office talk to that a little bit, and Ms. Bruin and Luann talk about it a little bit, and then after that, I would be more than happy to let them all go.
Absolutely. Great.
Yeah, sure. So the only thing I wanted to update is we now have the finalized audit for Northwood. We should be having the finalized audit for Nottingham the next day or so, as well as the SAU 44s. So we're moving right along on those for the 2021. We did talk about the structure for the changes for the grants. So we are going to be in full compliance for the grants for the audit in the current year. That is our main goal, so that the auditors will see the great progress we've made. And a lot of the legwork Luann has taken on, so I can't take the credit for that one. So, but we are making leeway with food service. We noticed that a lot of things were behind for the last 8 months. There are a lot of things that are not entered. The bank statements haven't been entered since August. So we're working on that. We thought we were all set when we hit SAU, and then we learned today, we're like, oh, Northwood and Nottingham aren't up to date. So we're doing a lot of back work, and we're trying to get prepared for the FY23 because this new accounting structure all has to be done within the next week or so that we can give that to Tyler to implement for us so that we are ready to go for FY23. So everything's starting to align. Things are looking great. The auditors, we're working with them to make sure that we can start balancing all the accounts for the current year. So we have some good progress going on. Do you have any questions?
Do you have an individual assigned to you for Tyler to work through changes that you do?
Not specifically, but it seems like Mary's my go-to person.
She's in there. Is she a project manager? Is she customer service? Or
She's a project manager, but she also does customer service, but she's for the general ledger. So it depends on what I'm calling on behalf of. I will
Right.
get a specialist that's geared to that module.
so you
So
call
right
in
now
and-
it's basically the general ledger.
Yeah.
So whenever I call, I seem to get Mary. So Mary and I, we email, and
Got good consistency.
very good consistency, and their response time is amazing. The customer service is absolutely fantastic, to be honest.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Any other other questions for anyone on the audit process?
Just for like the Norfolk, well, all the audits, but we typically get a, like a little bit of a presentation from the audit company. Is that, will that be coming to Norfolk? Is that been scheduled yet? Or do we not?
Has not been scheduled yet. I was planning on speaking to the board
Okay,
at the next meeting because it's final to make sure when you want to do it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
that's good. Good question.
Nothing else?
Okay. If you ladies want to leave, you're all set.
Sure.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
everybody.
Have a good evening.
Have a good night.
So first in the personnel.
You move faster than me, sorry.
Take your time.
We won't all stare at you. don't
Here.
worry.
I know, it's like, when my kids can actually move faster than me, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the only good thing. Yeah,
Mhm.
just gonna run you.
Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow, hockey.
Yes. Have a good
It's better for you.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So, under personnel, I would like to nominate Luann Shepherd, as you got to meet Ms. Shepherd today, for grant management. We do have sufficient amount of money under the budget. We did budget for a grant manager separately from our grant coordinator. We had a grant manager for a total amount of $50,000 under there. And we have not come close to expending all of that because we're using our current grant coordinator to do some of it. But the skill set that he has is the administrative skill set and the knowledge of what the state's looking for in the filing of paperwork and understanding how to write the grants, but not necessarily the accounting background. And that is where we were falling short on in the audit. So Ms. Shepherd has been joining us. As I said, I was going to nominate her, but start her ahead of time. She has been cleaning that up and they have been making a large amount of headway in getting that squared away. What we currently do, just so you know, is the way we currently do things is we purchase it using a false PO under the SAU number, and then we bill it back to the grant later. And that's what was getting us in trouble because we weren't billing them fast enough. And that's where the audit was, there was too many changes. We were making too many adjustments, and that was one of their major things. We should be billing the grant directly. The problem is our accounts were never set up to be able to import grant information in and then bill it. Once this change takes place, we'll be able to move, it'll be much more efficient and well, it's kind of redundant, but much more efficient and time management, less cost. Because we won't be doing things twice.
So you're basically saying you want to roll through. You were using like a grant management format before, but now this will just track right through general ledger.
That's correct. We were using what was called Grant Tracker.
Okay.
And
So
it
a
was going-
side system that has to do journal entry, then the journal entries aren't made, and then they're all.
Correct. And partly that was done because that's what we used before we went to the new version of Tyler. And Grant Tracker was a key component of it because they didn't have the availability to do what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So we went through it, and that's what our current coordinator, Mr. Wolf, knew how to use and was doing, and that's what we continue to do.
Yeah.
And it worked pretty well when we had our accounts payable person who had 30+ years of experience to make those transitions faster, even though it was some redundancy in there. It was going through, and we never had errors, but it was still an issue of doing things twice, and it became an issue because there was more of a chance of errors, and it made it harder for the auditors to track what was going on. They would ask for a lot of information, and it would take them much more time to find the information than if it was just flowing through the ledger.
So the grant manager, does he now know the Tyler system? Or
He's doing pretty
knows
well
it
with
well
it.
enough to have everything run through?
I
Tyler?
wouldn't say
Will he need
he's
some training?
he's doing it with Luann. They're
Okay.
working together. Yes, you're still the grant. He would still need Luann is going to be a key component moving forward for Nottingham,
Yeah.
but not able to do it all on her own. So but he is learning how to do it in that system.
And
So
that's what I'm.
that
curious
you
if
won't take
he's
another.
already doing that right now, learning how to do
So
it in
he,
Tyler.
and my understanding is he does sort of the coordination, he's a grant coordinator, and you still need that accounting side to take, so he's gonna manage the timing and the paperwork and the flow and.
But he'll be billing it to the correct line now versus
Okay.
billing it in a grant tracker. And if grant tracker will go away, pretty much is what it looks like. So the easiest analogy that I have is think of overdraft for your banking account. So what would happen is you'd make a purchase and if there wasn't enough money, pull from your savings to pay for your checking. That's what we're doing now. We didn't have enough money, so we're pulling from one account to another account to pay it until we could then be reimbursed from the state. Because the money doesn't come in at the same time, we have to bill it and the state pays for it. And since it only became an issue because we were billing everything through the SAU and all the grants were combined, not an issue because they were coming out of the SAU, but when they started getting billed to the local budgets first, we could have separated because there's enough money in the local budgets to cover it. But there was not enough money in the SAU to cover a grant without a fund balance. That's why that is why in the history you had a larger fund balance at the SAU than you used to. Like you have less now, but you used to have a larger one was to cover those grants.
We need a motion.
Yes, please.
I will motion to approve the hiring of Luann Shepherd for the position of grant management, salary of $35.90 an hour out of the local operating budget.
Second.
Is there a second? Great. All right, so we have a motion by Brian Winslow and a second from Susan Levinson. Is there any discussion? Any additional discussion? So she's working for SAU 44 up through the transition and then she's coming over to you all?
She's doing some work for us too, so we're
Yeah.
splitting the hours.
Perfect.
So 10 on this, hopefully 10 will cut it.
Yeah, it has been.
All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Welcome to Ms. Shepherd.
I don't have anything that came to the joint board for correspondence at this point to share with you. As you know, the only thing that did come in, you're already aware of, which is the co-brown meeting on the 11th, and that is at 6 o'clock. They will be giving a tour, so we'll be able to walk around and see some of that. There'll be some, that's the only major correspondence that came to the joint board. It also came to local boards, but since
That starts in the gym. if I remember
that is correct, not where it
No.
normally would start. It's over in the
Multi-purpose. room.
multi-purpose. I thought it was.
Multi-purpose.
I think
Yeah.
it said multi-purpose.
I think it is multi-purpose.
I
So
saw one
for
in
those
the
of you
back.
that know the campus, where should I go?
Yeah, exactly. It's in the left side, not the gym side.
The left side of the
Okay.
original building.
Kind of the main original
Towards
building, the
Back
one
of the
to
building.
the left.
Okay.
The old gym.
The
That was
the
my
main,
guess,
the main
actually.
You'll see
doors,
people
just
going.
go right in the main doors and walk straight
That's-
through.
Walk straight. Yeah.
So, yes, where they do the plays, the old wooden court.
Okay.
That's Jerry's gym, multi-purpose around there.
Maybe we should all meet.
Yeah.
In tourism.
Well, if you're looking at the gym, the Jerry's gym, multi-purpose is
Right behind it.
I-
right back.
I think you
Yeah.
don't even go into it by the gym. I just think you go up the main stairs into
Yeah.
the main hallway and walk
Just
straight
keep
back.
going.
Yeah,
and it's
Okay.
there.
you can get there from.
There is a convoluted way to go through it. You'll get,
I'm
I'll
sure I'll
meet
figure
you
it
there.
out.
I'll
Shouldn't
meet you
have
there.
even brought it up.
I'll give you a hand. We'll get there.
Yeah, it's the like main old one.
So, the update on this, the Stratford separation agreement. So we met at the, prior to the last meeting. Currently, right now, the lawyers have looked at it. I know that they have done some edits. We haven't seen a final edit because they're waiting to put the numbers in from the final approved audit. But the only things that have changed, I gave it to Mary, Ms. Bulger today to send out. The only thing that had changed was we had an anticipated number of approximately 27,000 and change is what our assets were worth. And we agreed at that meeting to say, let's round it to 30 and move forward with that. And then the other one was the compensated absences. At the point, we still had Ms. Hodgson in the compensated absences, but she was paid out prior to the end of the fiscal year. So that has been removed, and that's in this packet now. So that shows what the compensated absence price is now. for that separation.
Great.
While I'm talking about compensated absence, well, I can do it after. I have the other one too. So that's the compensated absences for the Stratford separation agreement. Are there any questions on that as I gave a very brief update? Once we get the finalized audit, it's gonna go really fast. Because once we get that, we only have, I believe what we'll need to do is actually have a special meeting. Because we only have about 2 weeks to come up with the final agreement to give them and get it approved and set it up and send it to them.
So the impression is now that there's no other language changes in it, it's only numbers.
That's
And
correct.
they have not proposed any additional.
Not,
changes.
that is, to my understanding, as we we talked about everything. There's been no other language changes that were
Okay.
proposed to me. And when I spoke with Mr. Gordon, I said, where are we at with it? Are we all set? He said, all they were doing was verifying the numbers we gave them. The major thing that they wanted to clarify was what they were entitled to for the preschool. And that was one of the numbers where I said, I think it's this number. But then we looked at the end year, and that was prior to us realizing that the fund balance had been stored for all those years. So now that we have the knowledge that the fund balance is there, that's where we're currently at, which is what I asked Ms. Bullen to make sure she could go over in detail today. So the legal updates, the only update that I would have for you is what I had shared with you before. We are waiting for the audit. And then Mr. Graham feels as though we'll be able to come to a final resolution, get that out to everybody to preview, and then we can have a meeting and get that done right away so that we can, because what we did say in our transition meeting with them on the separation when we met was that we would have it, I believe it was 2 weeks after the audit was finalized. Miss looking
Yes,
for
you're
Miss,
correct.
okay,
Mhm.
or
Or
June 15th. So
Mhm.
we'll have it before June 15th because the audit will be finalized with it before then.
But the date was earlier.
Was it 30 days? 30 days of finalization? Okay, sorry. So 30 days, so it might fall around, it's, so 30 days or no later than June 15th, but we'll have to do it before the 30
Probably
days.
roughly the same at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, the SAU inventory, we briefly touched upon that earlier. The lists are out. So here's what I needed to question or ask of the board, and I didn't want to open up a can of worms. So when we started walking around, we have multiple lists going out with not really different prices, but they weren't very well labeled. What desk is what? Who, like we could say there are 5 metal desks, but they're not all the same size metal desks. So I don't want to bite off more than I can chew, but I didn't want to change anything, without talking. I think what could possibly happen is go through and not relabel every piece of furniture, but look at some of the desks, and I could probably tell you, like that desk, even though it was on the inventory and we said it had value, if we look at it, we know, like if we try to move that, I don't think it will really move well. There are a couple others that we could look through and say, here's the desk, it's in this room, so that you could look at it one more time and say, this is the one I want, or this, it all depends. I'm willing to take on some of that. The other question that I would say is, I would have said is, since we already have a further depreciation because they paid out a portion of it, typically you would redepreciate something in 2 or 3 years later after the last time you looked at it, meaning we first gave prices to these 2 years ago and things have gone down again, but because you've given equity out of them already, I don't really truly think you need to readjust, because at a certain point, you're not going to have anything left.
Yeah, I mean, with the furniture, it's kind of like we're looking at furniture, then we're looking at the fund balance. It's kind of like we're just trying to make both of them roughly, even proportionally or whatever. So it's, I mean, it doesn't matter if a desk is, $200, $300. It's like, if we're kind of on the same scale and we split it up proportionally, then it doesn't really, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter exactly what the true current market value is.
So I agree with you, and I think my thought might be on some of this is that we could take some photos of the desks in the room and just say this is one metal desk, and have a list of all the photos, not just a number of some of the desks.
When you did the walkthrough, did you have an idea which, or you just kind of
We
made
were
notes?
struggling to figure out on
Which
the
one?
list which desk was which.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
So I think it'd be helpful to take the list we had before, but have it broken out by things that should be disposed and then identify the ones that are worth keeping.
Okay.
Trying to identify which office or which space they're in to help us. I took a couple pictures, but not of everything.
Okay, so I can look through and try to do some of that in a little more, but not change anything in the list, just maybe clean up that Excel sheet a little bit and say this one's probably not going to make a travel.
Right, yeah,
Mhm.
especially if the boards are both trying to look at that list, if it's a little more clear of which items were, that seems like that would be helpful.
I can look at that.
Thank you.
So the compensated absences, we talked about briefly with the last one, but I know that it had been requested that we give an update for current staff.
Yes.
So this is, I didn't want to confuse it. So this is the current as of I believe this is as of the 4th is when we received this. So 5 days ago. So if you want to write May 4th, it didn't come out on the print, but it is May 4th. These are the numbers. You're welcome.
Will we have in here before the end of the fiscal year? Our 2 new hourly employees, or no, because they're only part-time?
Because they're only part-time, so there won't be any
They won't be
additional.
accumulating.
But I would like to speak to the board of non-public a little bit about this at the end of everything. I just want to give you a little bit of an update on some of this.
Great.
But it regards a certain individual, so.
Great. Any questions about this for Mr. Byrne? Thank you very much. All right, so we are moving on to our policies. And our policies, we need to, this meeting, look to reaffirm DFA, which is our investment policy.
Make a motion to reaffirm policy ZFA investment policy.
Second.
I have some discussion on that one.
Sure, let's first, let me just mention, it's a motion by Brian Winslow and a second by Todd Abernathy. And some discussion, go ahead, Susan.
So, on this one, I went out and looked at, I realized the policy I think we currently have was updated relatively recently. We don't have, you look at page 17, the documented internal controls. And we don't have a finance committee, I don't believe. We had an audit, I think that kind of changed in March. My concern is the 197:23-A talks about treasurers and indicates that when they make investments, they will speak to the board. So my concern is on the very last page on 17, with funds being left to the discretion of the finance committee without prior approval of the board, and the fact that we will be separating soon as of June 30th, I have concern. What if long-term investments are made, something of that nature? I mean, we don't have any history of that, but that concerns me, and it is inconsistent with the statute that says that there will be. And maybe our separation agreement can speak to it, but I hate to have a policy that's not running consistent with other agreements we may have. So that's my concern.
So you're suggesting that we rewrite number 3, the internal controls?
I think
to
I'd leave
better
internal
reflect-
controls there, obviously, but I think we need to just either strike or indicate that it would be, there would have to be approval of the parties that are
Mhm.
We won't be in the SAU at that time, but we will still have an interest in the funds that are being invested. So I would recommend that the parties with an interest in the funds should have to approve any investment, something like that.
Is this, I mean, I'm just trying to think practically, because as we split up, is this like what might be invested like in the next fiscal year before the audit's completed, or how does this?
I'm not sure exactly. It doesn't specify times. It just basically says that essentially your investment of funds will be left to the discretion of the finance committee without prior board approval. I don't think we have a defined finance committee. So right there, there's a concern or an issue. And if this policy isn't put in place, I assume it will be in effect as of July 1st for the SAU.
Northwood School District will have a different one. I think the joint board policies are gonna start to be defunct because you're not gonna have.
So what policy will we be under, I guess? I mean, I know we need to have this and we do have it in place, but it does raise questions about funds that are still of interest to both districts, even though we may not be in the same SAU, and then we may also become subject to various policies.
So could you strike that sentence about the investment of funds and then deal with the issue of what can be done with the fund balance and the separation?
If we have that understanding, that would make sense. It makes sense to me. But again, I just raise it for the entire board to just see that there are some
So,
inconsistencies. That's
Is the
all.
feeling that if we remove that statement, that there would require approval of each board, or is that unsaid? Because it's not really clear. It talks about, the treasurer and superintendent with the investments, but it doesn't really state kind of the.
What if we just said the SAU fund balance will be held in a traditional savings account?
Which is where it is now.
Right.
Mhm.
So like no CDs, no
No
long-term
long-term.
investments that can't be pulled. So
Right.
like,
there are no current investments.
no, the districts have not done that before. I think it's a gamble to do that. So that's why they haven't. I think it's just been holding on an interest-bearing account, a standard interest-bearing account.
Right.
So I think you could do something like
Just
that.
say the SAU fund balance will be held in a traditional savings account.
I'm fine with that.
Susan, it's the
I
one
think
who brought
it's-
that up. All right.
Should we put something in? If there is going to be any movement of that money that should be agreed upon by the boards. I mean, as long as it's just for further clarification or.
Yeah, I mean, once the fund balance is in there, we want to be moving it, but I understand what you're saying.
You know what I mean? I'm not trying to, we're splitting hairs, I think, but,
Can you say that again, Lori, so I can just get it?
I'm just asking if we should clarify that if there were to be any movement of the funds, there would be approval by board.
Until time that the separation has been completed.
Right.
The full
The
separation.
full financial, yeah.
That just makes it clean. Goes with what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's an end date, like once, like this one, once Stratford's paid out, once the district is paid out until the financial separation has been completed, I think would make sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it should be approved by both Nottingham and Northwood.
So do these joint school board policies expire on June 30th, 2022?
They're still a part of SAU 44, but what we're gonna have to work on is combining the Northwood and Nottingham,
And
because you're
what?
gonna have multiple policies in.
Yep,
So
yep.
it's a combination. So this one I would say would stay in there for another year. And we would look at the Northwood one, where you already have DFA, would be just the Northwood School District one. So there'll be some inner overlap. Yeah. So
I
you have
think
to,
until the separation is fully complete after next year's audited numbers, that all the joint board policies would have to.
financial,
remain in
yeah, the
place, right?
financial parts, yeah.
Right, any other discussion on DFA? Mr. Winslow, do you want to change your motion to as amended?
Well, it would be reaffirming at that point, shouldn't we go?
That's true.
My second read,
Oh, because we don't have the changes.
right, but we can move it forward because it was reaffirmed. The reason I say we want to move it to second read is if we go to first read on
Right,
there.
move it to second.
to second
Okay,
read.
yeah, that's what I just want to clarify, yeah.
I'll amend my motion to move policy DFA investment to second read. Second.
And a second from Todd. Thank you for keeping it simple. All right, so the motion is to move our investment policy DFA to a second reading as amended, with a motion from Mr. Winslow and a second from Mr. Abernathy. All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? All right, opposed? Abstaining? All right, that passes unanimously.
Motion to adopt policy EAF administration of federal grant fund.
Okay, so motion from Mr. Winslow, and a second from Mr. Abernathy. All right, any discussion on DAF? Scan through. So this is our second reading of this particular policy. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of officially affirming? No. Adopting, that's the word I wanted. All right. All right, so all those in favor of adopting DAF as provided to us in our second reading? Right, any opposition, abstentions? All right, and that also passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right, and we are moving on now to our other items. Does anyone have any other items for the good of the joint board? All right, seeing none, we have our SAU structuring committee and SAU transition committee updates up next. I know we've discussed kind of removing those because each of those individual groups, I know that for us, our structuring committee is no longer, or our transition committee is no longer meeting. Does anyone have any specific updates? Does anyone disagree that we should strike this from future agendas? In agreement? All right, so moving forward, we're going to take the SAU structuring committee and transition committee updates out of our future agendas, as most of the items that we're currently working on are built into our joint board agenda. All right, future meeting agenda items I have that we need to hash out the minutes, or not hash them out, actually have the minutes from April 11th. and January 10th, and we should be able to move those forward at our next meeting. I also have that we do have a proposed work session of some type between a few members of each board to continue to discuss the SAU inventory. So we should be able to report on that at our next meeting. Anything else for future meeting agenda items that I might be missing?
I'm just wondering, because the next meeting, our June meeting, I mean, in terms of having like a written separation agreement, how does, I mean, at this point, we haven't, as a, we talked kind of loosely about we should do this and that, but we're gonna need a separation agreement that we can sign.
So I think we're working on that, so. we'll get
Nothing
it to
is
you
ready
guys.
on that.
Yeah.
Great. Do you think that will be, well, I guess we'll be discussing that in our individual boards. Right?
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, if we're gonna have it, if we're going to have that on our meeting here, it would be kind of courteous, I think, if we could, Northwood could see it ahead of time, just if that's possible. If not, then we can do 2 meetings next month, but you know. Well, I mean, I think it's probably pretty straightforward and there's not really any surprises because we're pretty with each other right now, but so.
And we have a very recently vetted separation agreement that we can
Right.
structure ours off of.
And,
That will hopefully be signed before.
Exactly.
Yes, I agree.
and I mean, and I'm just hoping that, like, you know, we can wrap ours up in June and then, you know, just wait for the audit, and one probably won't be quite that clean, but you know, that'd be great.
Not be dealing with it for an entire year. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
that's. I'm not quite sure where-
Yeah.
No, that wasn't, you know,
It's a little bit of everything, so. All right, future meeting dates. There'll be some discussion about an SAU inventory meeting that will be discussed further. Our next joint board meeting is scheduled for June 13th at 6:30. Yes.
If I may, should
Sure.
we move that to the 6th and have the 13th as a backup if we need it?
Mm.
Because if we do it on the 13th and we need an additional one, it's going to be really tight press with the end of the school year, with events. You know, when we're looking at all those calendar things, if we want to keep Mondays as our dates, because there's a lot of things coming up in the end of that. That would be my only concern. And I am actually at a conference on the 27th and 8th.
I think I work that night because I schedule all my meetings.
Yeah,
around
I'm
what
sorry, I get that, I'm looking, and,
There's only so many days.
right, so that was my only concern, was if we were to move it up, also because that allows us to get, that's still last minute to get purchases, by the way.
Absolutely.
So if we can't find one in May, I'd hate to wait till all the way till the
Mhm.
13th. That's a concern of mine.
May 30th is Memorial Day, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
What was May 23rd?
October.
Yes.
You got the 31st, which is a Tuesday. Again, I mean, it's hard with schedules. I'm just, I'd love to get one on the books as
Yes.
opposed to waiting, because I
Mhm.
think I know we're gonna need more than one.
Mhm.
Tuesday the 31st.
Tuesday, the 31st, anyone opposed to that?
I cannot be here on that day.
You
So
cannot
that
be.
part of that Memorial Day weekend.
It's the Tuesday
fall off,
after.
yeah.
Mhm. Will you be able to join us, Ms. Cooper?
Which day?
Tuesday, the 31st of May?
Probably not. I don't know yet. I'll have to look. I'll have to try to figure that out.
Mhm.
So do we feel that with the separation agreement, do we feel like we'll have to have another meeting before to have it signed if the audit comes back for timing? For
You're talking about the Stratford
the
separation?
Stratford separation, I'm just wondering if we're also gonna need to meet for that anyway, before our next transfer.
I thought they said the audit was done already.
No, the preliminary audit is done.
Okay.
It hasn't been finalized. It should, the finalized audit for SEU 44 should be done with all the trial balance and everything within the next few days.
So you got your adjusting entries. You gotta book all of those and then sign all the, sign your life away that you glad that it's all good.
I'm just wondering if sooner.
Well, I mean, we can wait. I just threw that out there because I saw the date of June 13th as our next meeting and was concerned.
Yes.
That's the
I
only reason I
agree.
threw that out there.
So June 6th didn't work or?
You can, I mean, not on my account. but
Outside,
You know what I mean?
outside of Miss Kilworth, anyone else, June 6th is an issue?
Why don't we at least hold a date?
Yeah.
For everybody who can.
Yep.
Okay, cancel it if we can't make it or whatever. so.
Yes. All right, let's hold June 6th.
But we're still gonna meet on the 13th.
I think you're
I
probably
think we
gonna
need
need
them.
some.
I think we need them. All right, so we'll plan on June 6th and June 13th, the first 2 Mondays in June at 6:30 here at the SAU.
We'll figure out which items.
We'll set agendas, yeah, for each of those two dates. That sounds fantastic. All right, are you feeling good about that, Mr. Byrne?
Yes, I think what we'll do too is, I think some of this we'll be able to, at the local boards, make
Mhm.
decisions even regardless of what you choose here, knowing what's needed. For, for staff members who might need something, we can purchase some of it, but that we just wouldn't make the final purchases. The
Right.
key is we have to purchase it. And my concern actually right now, as I look at we talked about the doom and gloom of the cost of everything.
Right.
My part is the shipping.
Mhm.
Everything has been delayed, and in order for it to be legitimate, it has to be in before July 1st. We have to have receipt of it. And big items might not get shipped fast enough. Some of them, like if you look at orders right now, they're saying, okay, we'll have it to you in 6 weeks.
Mhm.
That's gonna be a little rough.
I think the biggest piece is going to be technology, because I think we can have people, and I don't know about Nottingham, but I know we can have people work from home or whatnot, but they need the technology to be able to do what they need to
Right.
do. If the desks are delayed or whatever.
Right. So that's, I think that makes me feel much better knowing that we have 2 set up, and if we need more, we can set up more.
Absolutely. All right. All right, we have a need for a non-public,
Yes, under A and C.
A and C. All right, so I'll make a motion that we go into non-public under RSA 91-A:3, Section 2, A and C.
Yeah, no, the Stratford agreement because there's still some questions about the crops that we've seen.
Okay.
All right, so under A, C, and L.
I'll second.
Thank you.